Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Alexandra Roxo, who's here to share with us her new book, Dare to Feel, The Transformational Path of the Heart. So have you been taught to avoid your feelings? Most of us have been taught how to feel. In fact, we were taught not to feel. And today, Alexandra is going to share with us how exploring our feelings with an open heart actually makes us more powerful in many aspects of our lives. So Alexandra Roxo is an artist, best-selling author, spiritual teacher, and transformational coach. She has been featured as a guest speaker on many renowned podcasts and at numerous festivals and events worldwide. She has also had several TV appearances, including 2 seasons of Netflix hit show Too Hot to Handle. Her work has also been featured in the New York Times, Harper's Bazaar, Vogue, Guardian, Nylon, and many more. So let's welcome to the show, Alexandra Roxo.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, I have been on a conscious spiritual path and healing path for a long time. And there were many years where my practice of healing and engaging with my spirituality in a way that was just essential to my life, that was very private. And then at a certain point, it became a part of my work. And I thought, you know, is this going to be a scary thing to start talking about my own healing journey and where that intersects with my spiritual journey? Because I see them very closely intertwined. But is it going to be a scary transition as a writer and an artist who previously I had worked in film and TV? But to then shift from writing from that narrative standpoint, let's say about a character, to instead writing from my lived experience. And I made that shift, and I started making that shift almost a decade ago, and really using my own healing experiences, which I consider to be my soul work, like the reason that I'm here on this planet, incarnated to do this deep soul work. But I started using those lessons in my writing, and then teaching, and then sharing about it, so that my work as an artist and a writer in general could hold all of my own devotion and years of study and practice. So in my first book, I really dealt with healing some of the curriculums that I had experienced around sexuality and spirituality, and where I was told they couldn't coexist. Also around my voice and speaking up as a woman in the world, around feeling empowered. And I looked at those as these kind of collective wound templates that a lot of us get in terms of being told by society or by social norms certain things about ourselves. And so for me, my first book really talked about, hey, as a woman, I'm allowed to be deeply holy and spiritual and also sexual, a sexual being. And the sex negativity that I grew up in this world that has told me so many things about it, about sexuality, I'm allowed to heal through that. And not only am I allowed, but I must. And also, I've been told, my body is ugly, or I'm not lovable if I am bigger or smaller or this or that. So I also need to heal that. And so these kind of curriculums I considered the core feminine wounds. I was like, this is a lot of the groundwork that I feel like is necessary, in a sense, like almost like intergenerational karmic cleanup, that especially as women and Western women, that we've had to do, or we have to do. And so this book, Dare to Feel, my second book, is like kind of like, well, what's next? after you do a lot of that healing on yourself, maybe making peace with your body, your sexuality, with your voice, with some of those kind of core wounds that you have, then what? How do you then bring yourself into the relational field, into connection and intimacy, essentially bringing everything up into the heart? So if you look at it based on like the chakra system in yoga, the wounds of, let's say, the first, second, and third chakra would be like the wounds around your roots and your sacral center and your power center, and the curriculums and experiences and stories that reflect those places, and then bringing that all into the heart and into intimacy and connection. So this book, Dare to Feel, is really about how we show up to relationship, and that feeling and emotion and sensation is the language of connection and intimacy. And so when we don't speak that language, spiritually speaking, and we don't have a context for it, or we have fear around it, then, we can really prevent ourselves from entering into some of the biggest heart opening that we would want to spiritually experience in a lifetime. So, Dare to Feel, the transformational path of the heart, is really about that journey into the heart, into the caverns of the heart, the wounds of the heart, the ecstasies of the heart, and what's there, and how do we enter into each relationship, family, friendship, romantic relationship, and feel the feelings and have the experiences and turn towards the tough conversations in order to expand.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you going through that and explaining that. And it's so interesting. I think so many people have been taught to, in many ways, shut down and to not feel. So, how do they start to get to a place where they're feeling safe or feeling like it's okay to start feeling even just a little?
Yeah, a lot of us, I mean, my book starts out by just talking about how as children we're taught not how to not feel emotionally and physically. We're taught to sit still, we're taught to be quiet, and a lot of that structure that is necessary. Otherwise, a society would become very chaotic. But a lot of that structure has come from real repression and repressive intergenerational behavior, right? And it's like uh, being taught to not feel as children, like to not be able to go to the bathroom, just to sit in our little chair at school, or to just not cry. Maybe someone says to you, like, you're okay, don't worry about it, but you're not okay. So you learn how to repress, or maybe you learn how to numb yourself in certain ways. And you learn that, if you eat something when you're sad, then the feeling kind of goes away. So, all in all, our society, we're not really given a crash course in how to feel and how to be with a tough emotion, or how to be with a tough conversation with someone we love. And that can create a shutdown. I will say also that, intergenerationally, if you grew up in what we now call the United States, we have to look back at our ancestry and go, where did my ancestors stop feeling because they were a part of, let's say, slavery, or the genocide of indigenous peoples, or taking land from other peoples? When did they have to shut down in order to survive, right? And they couldn't really feel how potentially difficult or terrible some of the things happening were that our country was built on, if you're an American, which I am. So that shutdown goes back so far. And then we can look at that shutdown in our immediate families. How did the people that we grew up with feel their feelings, or not? Did they shut down and just drink alcohol, or work hard, or, watch more TV? Was there a safe space in the home for someone to cry, or someone to have anger without it being toxic or aggressive? So I feel like sometimes we're kind of like, babies in a way in terms of our emotional intelligence as humans. I'm like, oh wow, we really have a lot of recovery still to do. That being said, there's always exceptions. There may be families and cultures where that's not the case, where there wasn't a cultural repression or a cultural shutdown, and where there is a little bit more capacity to feel. And I also know that, we can look at just the overall global picture of the world we live in, and it's really hard to feel the truth of the suffering on the planet, or the suffering in our own homes and our families. And so that shutting down is also a self-protection mechanism at times. At times, it's actually a self-preservation mechanism, and that's okay. It's okay that sometimes we've had to shut down in order to survive. The magic comes when we come back around and we don't decide to live in that state.
I understand there are just thousands and thousands of people as well that came over as indentured servants that would work years to get beyond that. So even though we don't think of them as the norm, I would offer as part of being people who are shut down ancestrally, I would also think that they would join that group as well.
Yeah, exactly. Right. On that flip side, right? My experience would be my ancestors would have been, the oppressors, but on the flip side, yeah, everyone kind of who is involved in that drama triangle, if you will, has their own experience of shutdown. And so, yeah, I love that there's so much focus on healing. It's messy, but there's so much focus on healing and on mental health, and in the generations that are coming up now, in this beautiful way of just acknowledging of like, wow, we have a lot culturally and collectively to do in order to repair. It's just like a real beautiful rupture and repair cycle that I think we're all a part of in our own way.
I would agree. I think families have this generational thing, if they know it or not, that they've got to work through.
Yeah, yeah.
So, how do people get to this place where they can start feeling safe? Because I think that's such a big thing, especially if we're going through generational trauma or personal trauma. I mean, there's so much there that I think takes a lot of courage to start stepping through.
Yeah. Well, everybody's journey is so different, right? And we have to acknowledge that. And I think it's really important that there's not a one size fits all healing, right? Somebody might find this great healing through art or dance or song. Sometimes you can look back and see, like, well, what were ways in my family or in my ancestry that people did heal? And I think that may be one of the rituals in my book. I can't remember all of them exactly, but I offer rituals at the end of each chapter that can help you with healing. And I do believe there's one of them that says, think about the ways that your, ancestors used to heal or to connect with the divine. And what about that could you bring into your own personal practice in order to feel some sort of a gateway in? I do think also, because I do believe that our souls are here and have been here before. So I do think that there are also ways that we feel a resonance towards different healing modalities or spiritual traditions that maybe are beyond our kind of human family, our personal family. And I would say for anyone entering into that journey, is like just feel in your body, in your heart, what resonates with you. What feels exciting in your bones? What feels enlivening? Is it a particular yogic tradition or a particular poetry, something that feels liberating? And that's where we have that more spiritual understanding besides or beyond the simple psychological understanding, because on a spiritual level, there it's like, what lights me up? What feels like I can't explain why, but I need to be closer to that, or I need to try that, or I need to, engage with that practice. And so for everybody, I think it's so personal and so different. The most important piece is just getting on the journey and approaching the journey. And that can be the hardest. It's like, oh, do I really want to? Because at times it can feel like hard work. And that's just a reality, right? Just depending on what we've gone through, there are moments where our own self awareness, our own healing can feel like hard work. And there are moments where it can feel like such deep magic. And so it's like, don't give up. If it feels hard sometimes, it's like hang in there, because there will also be a very magical moment. So it's like, What's your gateway in? What's the door in for you? Where do you start? By feeling in your body, by noticing. Ooh, what's lighting me up? Oh, wow, that book is inspiring me. What's there? Or that teacher's voice or that music. And then follow the thread. It's like a little crumb from your soul telling you like, "Hey, come this way."
So, is that the how people can start to identify what's blocking maybe them from love or blocking their heart from being open?
Well, I would say that one is a little bit harder. That's basically that's part of the hard work side, which is to notice, okay, yes, I have different patterns in my behavior, or I'm noticing different patterns in my intimacy or my friendships. And how can I show up to that, whatever I'm noticing, and begin to make a change? The first step is always self-awareness. The first step is just noticing, wow, gosh, I keep dating the same type of person. Interesting. Or I hear myself repeating the same story over and over. Oh, there's no eligible guys around. They're all annoying or whatever. So noticing what it is in you that's a pattern. And that can be the hardest part for people because, it means we have to be honest with ourselves and not lie to ourselves. And that can be, pretty frightening to be that real with yourself. So you can start to pay attention to like, okay, I want to be honest with myself. I really want to look at and take full responsibility for my side of the street, for my own behaviors and patterns and how I show up in friendships and intimacy, and also to notice what's the feedback that I've received in the past from a partner, from a friend. What's the feedback that I've received? And instead of getting defensive about it, to let it be an indicator of like, oh, interesting. How can I approach this with curiosity? Not blaming yourself, right? Like I mean, I have all kinds of patterns that I've worked through, which I have looked at as these beautiful assignments. Okay, let me look at where I don't speak up because I'm afraid I'm going to lose love. And so in a relationship or a friendship, maybe I'm not fully honest because I'm afraid I'm going to lose love or be rejected or be abandoned. So, could I notice that? And could I begin to bring in awareness? And maybe next time I notice it with a friend, say, ooh, I'm really feeling nervous, to be honest, because I really don't want to lose you. But I have to tell you ABC, right? That like I actually am upset, or that I'm feeling like I don't agree with you or whatever. So we just start to notice and make small shifts in our behavior. That's when it really helps to have a community or a guide, because we all have these blind spots and sometimes we can't do those on our own. My greatest healing has been with great mentors, even with my romantic partner or friends, who in the book, there's a lot of stories about that. People who can reflect back and say, Alexandra, I'm trying to love you, but I feel like you have a wall up, right? Oof, that kind of feedback is really hard to hear, but it helps us to know our own heart and to go, wow, okay, maybe there is some barbed wire. What is that barbed wire? Well, that's because I was really hurt in the past. And then it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. You put some barbed wire up. So now does the barbed wire still serve you, metaphorically speaking? And then it's like, no, it doesn't. How do we take it down? And that's where we get more nuanced and we start to consider different practices or moments where we say, share our truth, or we lean in instead of leaning out, and that kind of thing, that help us to de-armor our loving and our hearts, to find more compassion, more empathy, and more kindness towards each other.
In your book, you share about aloneness and loneliness. Can you share a little bit about that for our listeners?
hmm I think it's actually the writer Osho has a beautiful distinction, spiritual teacher also, a beautiful distinction about the difference between aloneness and loneliness. And, aloneness is a beautiful state. It is a very spiritual state of being. Think of it as like a beautiful meditative state where you are not want for anything, and you can be still and be alone with yourself and be content in that place. Now, that's very different than you being in an avoidance state where, say, you just don't want to be around anybody or you're pushing people away from intimacy. Aloneness is a beautiful cultivation spiritually, I think. The ability to just be with ourselves, no phone, no TV, just to be. But loneliness is the wound template of needing connection, wanting connection, and not getting it. And there's usually a reason for that. I think because humans, we have the opportunity to connect with each other all around, right? There's a million opportunities. So, how are we lonely? And yet we are. There's a loneliness epidemic. People are very lonely, statistically speaking. Why? Because even though there's great connection all around us, it doesn't mean that it's easy to lean into it. It can feel awkward, it can feel embarrassing, it can feel destabilizing. So often we isolate ourselves without knowing it. And that's part of the unconscious tendency, therefore feeling lonely, but we don't realize we're doing that to ourselves. And that's where the healing happens is, oh, wow, I feel lonely. Now, sometimes that might be because you've just, let's say, gone through a divorce or a breakup, and your friend group is changing, and you've moved cities, and you haven't had the time to create deep connections or whatever. There can be really real circumstances that create loneliness. But even in those circumstances, it is up to us to lean in, to reach out, to bear the vulnerability of reaching out to a friend or loved one, even long distance, and saying, I feel lonely. I am really yearning for some connection. That can be terrifying to say, or simply say, I miss you. Can we hop on the phone? Or simply just calling that person you love. But sometimes when we self isolate, it becomes very difficult, and we can become sort of overly self sufficient. And we're like, oh, I don't really need anything. I can do it myself. But unfortunately, that hardens us. And then we become actually often less easy to um, approach, less, it becomes more difficult to lean into intimacy because we've become overly self-sufficient. So that vulnerability of letting ourselves need each other, for me to just say like, hey, Marianne, I need you. I need a friend today. That becomes part of the de-armoring process. Or saying like, God, I'm really sad. Like, I don't need anything from you, but like, could we just walk together in silence? So, as humans, the like loneliness epidemic, I do feel like I could talk about it for a long time because it has to do with technology and phones and all of these things. But I think that there's always connection if we're willing to bear the vulnerability and willing to sit in the discomfort of the feeling of loneliness first, because we also don't need to just run from that. It's okay to say, I feel lonely. I've just moved to a new town. I've just gotten divorced. I feel lonely. And to just be in that loneliness, right? And then to let that propel you, let's say, into taking action.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Alexandra Roxo in regards to her new book, Dare to Feel. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Every day, pets are surrendered and abandoned. For these helpless and hurting animals, Paws Humane Society acts as a voice for the voiceless, providing hope for a brighter future. You can make a difference in the life of a shelter pet. Become a humane hero today. Just $10 a month will provide much-needed food, shelter, medical care, and love. It takes a community. It takes heroes like you. Together we can. Together we will. Together we are Paws Humane. Visit pawshumane.org to be a hero in every animal story.
Lindsay Roy's new book, The Gift of Perspective, is a must-read. Lindsay's unique life stories of surviving and thriving after two major life challenges is a wonderful companion to start your new year. It's a great guidebook for anyone facing a challenge, big or small, in business or in life. Lindsay's own stories and the anecdotes of those she met along the way help illuminate real ideas in real circumstances, drawing out reflections and actionable takeaways for all. Full of faith, grit, and humor, this book has the power to change how you see things. The Gift of Perspective is available at Amazon, or visit Lindsay's website at lindsayroy.com.
Are you an actor, public speaker, or an executive telling your story over Zoom? Jean-Louis Rodrigue and Scott Weintraub's new book, Back to the Body, takes the process they use to coach top Hollywood talent like Margot Robbie, Jack Black, and Ke Huy Quan and makes it available to everyone. Using your body and its energy as a point of departure, your work will gain an enhanced level of performance and depth. Back to the Body, available on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Mary Ann. We're here today with special guest, Alexandra Roxo, who's here sharing with us her new book, Dare to Feel, The Transformational Path of the Heart. What type of action would you suggest for somebody that has a broken heart and that feels that they have that shut down?
Well, I think first and foremost, I'm a huge proponent of having a spiritual community. And I think part of the Western American kind of mindset is, we have had the opportunity to have religion not be a part of our inherent culture anymore. Whereas some countries have a religious kind of foundation or structure that holds them and people's lives. Let's say they are centered around a spiritual church or a synagogue or a temple or something like that. I think one of the downfalls of religion being, let's say, kind of picked apart from the fabric of Western or American culture is that we lose that. Where's the community hub? Where's the central hub for people to connect? Is it the grocery store? Is it the workplace? Is it the social media? And some of those can feel a little disjointed, where when people had a common value system, then that was like a great place to connect because we know we have similar values. However, many of us don't go to church. I grew up going to church. I don't go to church anymore. I still yearn for a spiritual hub and a community where I could, let's say, have a week where I was sick and there would be people dropping off food at my house. That was a real thing. And it's still a real thing in some places. And I think that is beautiful. But nowadays it's like, well, where do you find that hub? I have found many of them online, and I have found women's groups, circles of women, men, there are circles of men, there's circles for queer people, there's circles for sobriety, there are circles for yoga. So there's so many different virtual communities that meet on Zoom, which I would say is a great place to start based on your interest or based on your spiritual path. And I would also say find your in-person community and circle. And maybe it just starts as going to a dance class or a yoga class or going to some sort of a lecture or something like that, or an event at a bookstore if you're a book person like we are. And finding, okay, there are people with similar interests here. Now, the problem is that it doesn't end there, because just going to a bookstore yoga class, you could not speak to anyone and you could make zero connection there. So the other piece to that, which is a little harder, is then to approach someone and say hello and introduce yourself. I find that, if you join a community where you're opting in to knowing that everybody has a shared interest, you kind of don't have to do that last step of putting yourself out there. Say you go to an Al-Anon meeting online. Well, it's inherently built into the culture that you introduce yourself, or that someone in the group reaches out to you and introduces themselves to you as a newcomer. So that's not going to happen in the same way if you go to a yoga studio. The teacher may greet you, but it's not inherently part of the fabric that you're going to make a friend or that someone's going to check in on you. So I would say finding your online sangha, spiritual community, or some sort of a group that is connected to an interest you have, or finding it in person, or both. And I have had women come on my retreats and be a part of my online spiritual communities that have made their best friends. Best friends. Years later, they are best friends because they came on a retreat of mine and now they have a business together, or now they traveled the world together. So that's another option too, is like maybe you find some sort of a retreat that looks really exciting, a writing retreat or a spiritual retreat. And then when you're there, you do the work to say hello and to make conversation, but a lot of the work will already be done just being in a room with people with similar interests. So we can't do it alone, Marianne. That's the thing. We just cannot do it alone. We're not meant to. We're so interconnected as humans, and it can feel so scary to be vulnerable and put ourselves out there. But it really is how we feel love and belonging.
In your book, you talk about joy. I think sometimes that would be something that a lot of people may either resist or feel like it's something that they can't reach. So, how can they get to this place where they can start incorporating that in their lives?
Sometimes it means you have to grieve first. And if joy feels out of reach for you, hey, normalize this. You're human. The times we live in have felt quite heavy for a while. So there's that. That being said, there are extremely joyful people, or people that have expressed extreme moments of joy amidst incredible suffering. So we know it's possible, historically speaking. Um, but sometimes because we are numbed and dulled and kind of shut down, we don't have access to our joy because we also don't want to feel the grief, right? And so we just kind of shut down and feel everything at a little bit of a dull kind of a level. So oftentimes we're going to need to have some cries. We're going to need to feel some feelings in order to get to that joy. So we have to look at, am I laughing? Am I crying? How often am I? Am I just laughing and it's becoming some sort of a blanket band-aid for moments where I'm just always like, ha 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 ha, as an avoidance of the depth of the truth or of the pain of the moment? Am I always crying and just wallowing in sadness, and that becomes a habit or habitual life pose? Or am I just holding all of the emotions at an arm's distance? And so then we just start to pay attention. And then it's like, okay, well, the next time I'm sad, what would it be like to actually let myself cry and feel? Could I put on a sad song? Could I sit in the bathtub and actually go into my sadness and have some feelings? Could I share with a mentor or a coach or a therapist, hey, like, I'm feeling sad. I can't cry, or I'm afraid to cry, or I haven't cried in a while. So accessing the sadness or the grief then becomes a portal to looking at the opposite end of the spectrum. Well, where do I feel joy in my life? Where do I allow myself to feel joy? Am I totally cut off from my joy because I'm like, well, climate change and war and everything's just terrible? Or could I let myself experience joy in the small moments of life? And it is a huge practice, I think, especially nowadays. What I say is start with what you know. What do you know already brings you joy, right? For me, like animals and children are so much joy, and dancing and singing, so much joy. So I know those are some of my portals to joy. So let's say I'm playing with a friend's dog. I know I'm going to have a joyful heart. Let's say I'm dancing to 80s music in the kitchen. I know there's going to be joy that's going to just spring up from me. So I have to remember those things, and I have to create moments in my life. Okay, I'm going to put on this silly music. I'm going to sing at the top of my lungs in the kitchen. I'm going to, do an at-home karaoke with my beloved, and we're going to sing songs together if that's what makes me joyful, right? Yours might be totally different, which is totally fine. You might feel an extreme joy in cooking, and you realize, God, when's the last time that I cooked for people I love, right? You might feel a joy in tidying up the house if you're one of those special people. So it's noticing what works and actually adding that into your life as your practice and saying, it's essential that I make space for this. My life depends on it. My life is so sacred and so special. And if I'm not laughing and if I'm not creating moments for joy, the joke's on me, pun intended. The joke's on me, right? It's my life. But we all become quote unquote busy humans doing quote unquote important things, and so that also is so essential for us to just notice, oh, where can I orient my life to make space for more joy, right? Not only because I need to feel my grief, but also because I need to make space for it.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's such an important thing. And where do you think when you talk to people and you've worked with clients, where do you think most people tend to get stuck?
I would say that most people get stuck trying to get it right, thinking that there's a right way to love, to make love, to heal. Um, and that, especially because I work with a lot of women, that there's this internal perfectionist that's like, I want to do it right. I want to get it right. I want to get it done quickly in a timely fashion. And when it's not happening, it's like, what did I do wrong? Right? What am I doing wrong? And that kind of results oriented thinking is just a product of our society. When we don't have like an overall spiritual umbrella to our life, we are not always looking at things as, oh, but there's a spiritual timing and timeline. There's a karmic timeline. And I say karma in the sense of there's like a predestined timeline, perhaps. So when we think that the agency is all in our hands, then we can think, God, what am I doing wrong? My business didn't take off as I wanted. I haven't met the person yet, right? I didn't get pregnant yet. Like it must be because I'm doing something wrong. And so I hear people get stuck in that and just push, push, push instead of surrendering. There is an art to surrender. So when we feel stuck, how can we surrender? And whether you surrender to a higher power or to love or to your own life or to whatever, but surrendering. I surrender. I've done all the good work. I've shown up. I've done my due diligence. Now I have to stop pushing. I cannot control everything. And that becomes a deep practice. How do I surrender to this moment?
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I think that a lot of times that maybe people get a little, maybe things get hard when things start to get intense. So how do they cope with that? How do they, we've got some signs here and we're not used to really giving letting our emotions out, especially in front of people. So how do we deal with this intensity?
Yeah, it takes practice. Again, I think that there are other cultures or times on the planet where humans were feeling together, grieving together, collectively, crying together, and that became a bit stigmatized. And again, there's like, oh, I have to deal with it on my own. I don't want people to see how upset I am. I shouldn't be such a mess. There's all of this cultural programming and indoctrination that we are healing through. And so when things get intense, you may go, oh God, this is too much, right? Too much for me, too much for my family or my partner or my best friend. And how can you work on that? Potentially reaching out to someone who you trust and letting yourself be seen in a moment of intensity, not feeling like you have to power through alone. And maybe that is someone you pay. I've had times in my life where it is a great therapist or a coach or a mentor who sits with me in the moments of real intensity. That being said, having a few close, trusted friends, spiritual friends on the path that you can call is so wonderful. And I've had times where I felt like I didn't have those, but now I do. And having someone who, wow, I feel intense. The grief is intense. The anger is intense. The sadness is intense, whatever it is that's arising. And being able to call a friend and just be like, hey, I don't need you to fix this, but could you just listen? Because I just need to share about what's going on. Or could you come over and just sit with me? Again, that takes vulnerability and courage to be able to ask for help, to be able to let yourself be witnessed as well. And there are moments on the path where you might not want that, or it might not be appropriate for you on your journey. And you may need to just be in the bathtub with your candles and, you know, cry on your own and curl up with a movie and have a moment where you self-regulate, on that with those big emotions and those big experiences. However, I think a lot of the healing happens when we heal together and when we have a space together. And again, that may look like a spiritual community, a women's circle, a men's circle, a place where it is actually socially acceptable, if not social, it's welcome to feel together. Those spaces have liberated me. And I highly recommend, if you've never been to some sort of a collective experience, be it a group breath work or a retreat, but a place that you feel safe to feel in community, it will be so healing for you.
Do you feel that people need to do their own work on their core wounds before they start getting out there and maybe looking for relationships?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's no right or wrong way. A lot of people get married and then they're like, oh, wait, I have these patterns around my intimacy. Like I'm avoidant, or I get really anxious, or I get really jealous. So some people do that work within a marriage, within a partnership. And then some people are single and maybe they have pushed away intimacy, or they have armor up, or they haven't met the right person. And so if that's the case, why not start the work then? Why not start looking at those patterns and dive in? And there's just no right or wrong. I think the most important thing is that we're in the practice. And I don't think there's anyone out there who is immune to having patterns around your intimacy, right? I don't think anybody. I know even the teachers that I know who teach and are best-selling authors around intimacy and love, and I know some of them really personally, even they have all kinds of things that they face in their own close relationships. So it's just about showing up to it. That being said, in my life, for some reason, I found a way to and this is another thing people do, and I was one of those people, to avoid doing my work by choosing people that I knew I didn't have to do my work with. For instance, okay, if I choose somebody who maybe I have a little bit more control or power in the relationship, then maybe they won't leave me. I won't have to deal with my wound of abandonment. And then it's like, oh, what if I create a whole life around attempting to not deal with my wound of abandonment? This is how many people live a life. I've been one of those people in moments. And so sometimes it looks like everything's groovy on the surface. Oh yeah, I'm great. I'm in a marriage, da 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 da. When inside that person has made all of these decisions in order to avoid working on the core thing. I tell you, eventually it will come up. I really think it does. I don't think we can hide from ourselves. I don't think we can hide from these, you know, internal curriculums. And so the sooner that we get brave enough to look at them, the better. Whether we're in relationship or whether we're looking for relationship, it's totally fine. What's important is that we're being honest with ourselves. And that takes a lot of humility to go, wow, I chose this person because I thought they wouldn't leave me. And now I feel unsatisfied in the relationship, right? Or, oh, I keep saying no to love because I'm actually terrified of intimacy because I'm terrified of being rejected. So I keep telling everyone around me, oh, I just can't meet anybody. There's no one to meet. When in truth, The world is full of billions of people. And so there's something in me that's pushing love away. Those are hard things for us to accept. They take a lot of courage and humility for us to accept. And so everybody has a different moment on their journey when they're ready for that, to kind of to take a bite of that humble pie and go, oh, oops, I've been doing this, or I haven't noticed this, or I haven't wanted to be real about this. And then once we feel that, it's so liberating. It's so liberating to just go, oh, wait, there's nothing wrong with me because I'm single, or there's nothing wrong with me because I feel unloved in my relationship. I'm actually a part of the equation. And so I can do something about it now. I can work on softening my heart. I can work on revealing myself more in my relationship. I can work on letting go of control. I can work on speaking up for myself, or whatever the pattern is. So there's no right or wrong time. Everyone listening, like, we all deserve love. We all deserve to be met deeply in love. Don't give up on it. Don't give up on it. No one is too broken or too, messed up for love. We all are incredible. And it's just a matter of us getting in there, rolling up our sleeves and being honest with ourselves and showing up.
I like how in your book you talk about reviewing our life for our greatest heartbreak and really kind of asking these questions is how did that change the way we love?
It's really important for all of us, to have the courage to look at some of our hardest moments and to feel how beautiful they were as well, even the hard ones. And I know that is really, I'm saying that relatively speaking, right? Because we all have different levels of hardships, and some of them are ones that we don't want to look at. And you can say, Alexandra, I will never look at that with any love or gratitude. And that's fine. And I talk about that in my book as well. It's like some things, that's okay. But the things that we do feel like we have the capacity to turn towards and go, you know what? That was really hard. But what was the beauty in it? And what did it turn me into? What did it transform me as? And so, say it's a tough heartbreak. Like, what did I learn from that moment in time? What came forward for me? Who did I show up as? And not judging ourselves, but actually praising ourselves. Because even in the moments where let's say we're, engaging in terrible behaviors. Let's say the heartbreak I wrote about in my book, afterwards, I definitely engaged in self-destructive behaviors, but I also was able to feel this part of my own heart that I had never felt before, because I had never let someone in so deeply. I had never risked being rejected in that way. So I put my heart on the line and I let someone break it. And that in itself was a crucible that I needed to undertake, because it showed that I can do it. I can let myself be loved and I can let someone in. And so for you, if you look back at your heartbreak and say, what did I learn? What did I face that was so hard for me to face? Where did I expand in that relationship? And I just think there's always gold for us. Every human moment, every hard moment, every painful moment, there is gold in it. Look, we cannot look back at these moments if they happened yesterday. We need a little time and space between us and the experience in order for it to have processed, settled, and alchemized in our system. But once it does, it is extremely powerful for us to have that contemplative mind that can look and reflect on our life and see how incredible we each are and how strong and powerful we are, how resilient we are. And then that gives us the courage to love again.
In your book, you talk about grace. How does that just intertwine with all of this?
In my book, I talk about grace, and I think that grace is such a good one in the moments of extreme grief or pain or suffering emotionally or, psychologically, mentally, spiritually, because grace is like when we're on our knees and we feel so just like, I don't know how to get out of this. We can pray for grace. We can call in grace, and just it's a very similar energy to surrender. it's like there's like I'm surrendering. And then grace has a devotional quality. And in my life, it has a religious quality, even though I'm not a religious person per se, but I was raised, and there's a story about my Brazilian grandmother who's very Catholic, and she's on the other side now. She passed away at, I think, 92. But so for me, grace, something feels like, it feels connected to like this divine mother energy, this nurturing energy that says, I see you, my child, you're suffering, and I'm just going to hold you. And even though it's not an embodied human that's coming through in that grace way, which it can be in different moments in life, but the spiritual energy of grace it's almost like a waft of fresh air coming into the room when you're really feeling like everything feels stuck and painful. And it's like, "Oh, everything's going to be okay." And great, that's grace. Grace comes in and says, everything's going to be okay. It's like a remembrance of like, this too shall pass, my love. Right? It's like, the book by Pema Chodron, When Things Fall Apart, and a lot of her work, it's like, how do we sit in those rock bottom down and out moments and feel that this is actually for our awakening? Grace is a reminder in that moment. This is for you, my love. I've got you. You can handle this. And so sometimes praying for grace, asking for grace, or just having a relationship with grace in your life, however that is, can remind you in a tough moment, like, this too shall pass, my love. We can do this. And it's such a sweet remembrance.
At what point do people feel that they're really letting themselves, allowing themselves to feel love, to feel that connection with others?
I mean, only you can know. Everybody's open heart looks different, right? For somebody, their like level 1 open heart is a huge stretch because let's say what they've gone through in their life or their traumas. And so even their like heart door just cracking open a little bit is huge for them. And they're like, it's a huge victory. Where someone else going from, let's say, like a level 5 to 8 might be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I've gone from like this kind of, slight openness towards love to now I'm like really open. So that particular understanding of love and how we feel love is so based on what we've experienced this life, where we've shut down, how we've shut down, what we've gone through, how we've been hurt. And in a spiritual kind of understanding, love turns into compassion when it reaches this higher state. And so there can be this relational love, interrelational love, like me and my partner, me and my child. And then there can be this very divine love that starts to enter into higher states of compassion where you're able to feel love for strangers on the street, for the world at large. And that more spiritual love, it can be a dangerous place to live in all the time, right? Like you'd probably think somebody was a little strange if they were always in that state. But it's also a place to aspire to. And that's where, if you look at it religiously, think of some of the teachings around, let's say, Jesus, that's how I imagine him, is he says, love your neighbor as yourself. He's just saying, love everybody, right? And that's a higher state. That's a spiritual state of love. Are we meant to be in that 24/7? No, that would be spiritual bypassing, right? If we weren't really acknowledging on the relative level, on the human level, relative being like that word relational, relative relationship, that in that relative field, well, it's not going to always be high compassion. Sometimes my heart's going to close. Sometimes it's going to slam shut because I'm angry at my partner. I feel hurt from my parent or whatever. and that is okay. For us, we want to be able to hold the nuance. Can I hold the space for an aspirational, compassionate love towards my neighbor, towards someone that's hurt me, while also acknowledging the hurt in my body, while also healing through the pain and the sorrow and the anger, not pretending that I don't have that there, because that's also just going to be lying to myself. And can I practice opening my heart to the people I love and trust a little bit more each time, a little bit more each moment we're together? Could I love a little bit deeper so that I'm not just loving in the shallows where I don't have much skin in the game and I don't have to get vulnerable and I'm in control all the time, right? That's my heart's not really on the line. Like it has a little bit of armor up. And so you start to just notice this practice. Like, is my heart open or closed to this person? Sometimes it's totally healthy for it to close. Somebody may not be safe. They may not feel good. So that's okay. You don't have to open your heart to everybody. You don't have to love everybody in that way. And at the same hand, we do want to try to hold this spiritual awareness of everyone is my brother or sister in the greater awareness. Does that mean I'm going to go up to hug everybody on the street? No, because I'm in a relative world where I have to acknowledge my own safety and my own body and who I am and what I need, etc. So on a simple level, it's like, is my heart open? How open? When have I felt it the most open? What would it be like to practice opening it a bit more with those that I trust? And so that's where that fragrant, beautiful, blossoming love lives. And we do that in practice, meditation, feeling your heart, embodied practice where you practice feeling your heart. Maybe it's working with different, there's just so many different practices that help you to learn to feel your heart so that you can have a greater awareness of when it's closed and when it's open as well.
Well, Alexandra, I felt your book, Dare to Feel, was so empowering. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
So my website is alexandraroxo.com. I do work with groups one-on-one as well as retreats, and you can find me on Instagram at Alexandra Roxo. I also have a podcast by the same name of the book, Dare to Feel, where I talk to all sorts of people about feeling. And the best thing you can do is just read this book and let me know how it lands for you. I also do the audio version, and it's full of fun stories and poems. So check out the book, and I hope you enjoy it.
Well, Alexandra, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Alexandra. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Dare to Feel, The Transformational Path of the Heart. Dare to Feel is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.